Welcome to the Invested Dads Podcast, simplifying financial topics so that you can take action and make your financial situation better. Helping you to understand the current world of financial planning and investments, here are your hosts, Josh Robb and Austin Wilson.
All right. Hey. Welcome back to the Invested Dads Podcast. Today, Josh and I still heeding our COVID-19 request to work from home. So we're working from home. But we've been doing a lot of thinking as the markets have been all over the place, and definitely volatile time out there with a lot of uncertainty as we're sitting here at 1.9 million global cases of COVID-19 with over 550,000 here in the U.S., driving the stock markets crazy all the time, up, down, all around. Josh, it's a weird time. What have you been thinking about during this time?
Yeah, it's just, my wife and I were talking about this, that, years down the road, my wife was like, I need to take some pictures of us, doing stuff with the kids in the house, like Easter, all that stuff, to say, hey, do you remember when we were quarantined in our house on this kind of self-isolation thing? And because, my youngest is 2, she's not going to remember this, but to be able to show her and talk about, like, this was never before had we experienced this, and probably, hopefully, never again will we experience this. Who knows? But it's just a once unique event that try to document a little bit so that you can have that conversation about why we had to do what we did and what we did.
I saw a meme that was like, okay, it's about time, but all those Blizzard of 78 stories are now null and void, because this is we have a little bit longer, maybe bigger, and not, obviously there was a lot of sad stuff that happened during then. But this is our generation's Blizzard of 78.
Yeah, and I still have one question that has not been answered. So I had to run to the store the other day to just resupply and some essential stuff with 6 people in our house. We go through eggs and milk pretty quick, and I walked down the toilet paper aisle again, just thinking we're still good. We have some, but I thought, well, let me see what's there. It's still empty. Who is still stockpiling? Like, it's been 3 weeks now. Right. It's obvious that there's no immediate need for 600 rolls of toilet paper in your house. Who's still stockpiling this stuff? Like, who's still buying it right when it hits the shelf? Who's going crazy?
People are gonna be back to buying and selling houses in 6 months or a year or whatever that may look like, and you're gonna go through a house and you're just gonna see a basement full of toilet paper. You're one of those people.
I feel it's like it'll be like Beanie Babies, like, this will be worth money sometime. People are going to really want this. And then you're going to have just rolls of toilet paper in your basement. Like, no one wants it.
So something we've been talking about is how this situation, as far as, not necessarily the health side of things, the health side of things, we're trying to get a grasp on. I think we're making some headway as a country, but the financial side of things, the economic side of things, changing all the time. But we've been talking a little bit about how this may impact our financial situation, and Josh and I we had an interview with an author named Joe Sangl, and he's the author of the book 2020 Money, and we recorded this a little bit ago. So this is the interview that we had with him, and we feel like this is very fitting to kind of make sure that we are all keeping track of those long-term goals during these times of uncertainty when things are really, really difficult.
Yeah, and one of the things we've talked about is our goals that we're setting up for all these financial investments that we've been talking about. They're still out there. They haven't gone away. So if you're planning for some college in the future for your kids, or retirement, or a lake house, or whatever those goals are, they're probably still out there on the horizon, and they haven't changed. And so that's one of the things that is still, apparent for everybody that's planning for the future is don't lose sight of that vision. Don't lose sight of that goal, and make those decisions now. Am I in a situation now with the markets down, or there's a volatility, that I can actually enhance my ability to meet those goals, or just encouragement not to give up on those goals while you've seen some little disruption in your accounts and kind of your progress towards them? But that's one of the things you and I have been talking about is those goals don't change just because of a an event like this has disrupted our normal everyday today life.
So Josh, tell us a little bit about Joe.
Yeah, today we have joining us Joe Sangl. He is an author, a teacher, and he's spent a lot of time here in the personal finance world, something that we're very familiar with. And we ran across his book, his most recent book that just came out, and he's agreed to come on with us and talk about his new book. Joe, why don't you describe a little bit about what got you to this point and a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, great. Thanks so much for having me on the Invested Dads podcast. I'm fired up to be a part of it. And yeah, the latest book released in December, taking advantage of the year 2020 coming up. Me and 7 million other people, I guess, decided to talk about having 2020 vision for your life in the year 2020. And it's really about, I made it timeless because it is timeless to have clear vision for your life. So I use the 2020 vision concept. And I really took about 7 years off from writing a new book. I don't write books just to write a new one every year. I write it when I have a moment of inspiration. And I really have found as I travel and speak, and I get to speak 90 to 100 times a year on the topic of personal finances, that I always ask this question in my live events. I say, who here do not have your plans, hopes, and dreams written down somewhere? You don't have them written down. Mm-hmm. And it's always without fail over half of the room.
Oh, yeah.
And it's not that they don't have plans, hopes, and dreams. It's just that they have not written them down. And you and I both know that if you don't write things down, they're much less likely to get to become to completion. We won't go as far. Gail Matthews, a noted psychologist, has done research on this, says you're over 30% more likely to achieve a goal if you write it down. And so I really took the time to say, what is it like for people to actually really have a vision for their life and let that dictate how they manage their money? Because I find so many broke people, 70% of people, despite all the good work of you guys and Dave Ramsey and all the different financial experts out there, 7 out of 10 Americans still live paycheck to paycheck.
Yeah, and that's the biggest concern we're seeing is, like you said, is they may want to get somewhere, but they can't see past where they're at right now.
That's it. And they let their bank account dictate their dreams to them. And if you're like I was, I had an average bank balance of $4.13. And so I really wanted to inspire people to truly get a detailed look at their life. And I've got 22 questions that I've kind of narrowed it down to that really help people get clarity to that. And then we spend the back half of the book talking about ways to get your money in alignment with that.
Yeah.
Right.
And this vision, this idea, the 2020 vision came partly from your first book, which is I was broke and now I'm not. And that was talking about the path to get out of that way. But you need that vision to start this whole process. You need an end goal. You need to see that.
I realized with that book, I was broke, now I'm not. I was helping people fix financial issues. I was teaching the fundamentals of money, how to have a budget, how to get debt free, how to save money, how to get started investing. But I missed something that I had that many of the people I'm helping do not have, and I had clear vision. I had that aha 2020 clarity moment. The fog had lifted. I knew exactly where I was headed. I had tested it. I knew it. And I realized so many people haven't had that moment, and that is the reason why they're stuck. And even though they know they need to do a budget, they can't stick to it because when they get to that inevitable moment when they have to tell themselves no or wait or not now, they can't tell themselves why they're telling themselves no. And therefore they just give in and go live for the minute.
Yeah. I think that there were a couple things that really stood out to me from the book, but I think one of the biggest takeaways is that you have to be a dreamer to have a plan. And if you don't have a goal, which is a dream, you're not going to have a plan that's worth anything because you have nothing to work towards. And the fact that, and I talked to Josh and I talked to my wife about this, the fact of writing it down is just unbelievably powerful. And you just spoke on how much more powerful that is than not. But that is something that is just so simple and so easy to do and is going to have a huge impact on people's lives. So yeah, kudos to putting that on paper because you put your idea on paper and that's going to help other people put their ideas on paper.
There you go.
So
I love that.
That's very, very good. So thank you for that.
Yeah. And I think, like you said, is, for a lot of people, you mentioned in the book, is that fear. If once I write it down, like I'm becoming accountable to that. Like when it's floating in my head, nobody else knows I'm hoping to have this happen. But when I write it down and I put some accountability to that goal takes on a whole new life, a whole new meaning.
Yeah, it really does. And the fear of somebody in my family will see it, my friends at work will see it. And now that ugly word that many people don't value, but really helps those of us who make progress, that word accountability shows up.
Yep.
And even when we're having difficulty believing it, it's even tougher when somebody's holding us accountable to it. So they just choose to opt out and not write it down. And It's so sad.
And this works for the family. You talk about this here. We're talking about goals, but you're a dad. Tell us a little bit about your family to start with.
Yeah. So me and my wife, when we got married, she's the oldest of 6 kids. I'm the youngest of 6 boys. So we thought we would like to have a little bit larger family. But my wife, in her junior year of high school, had ovarian tumors, and we didn't know if we could have kids. So a couple of years in our marriage, we had a baby girl show up, and that was awesome. But the tumor showed up again too. And so we went on a 10-year journey with no more children. Mm-hmm. And so we finally gave up, and I made a brilliant financial decision. The financial teacher did. I canceled my maternity insurance to save money. And 16 days later, we found out we were expecting.
Oh, wow.
Oh, wow.
And so we had a baby boy show up. And then 3.5 years later, I went back and got that insurance. We had another little daughter show up. So this year, I have a sophomore in college, I have a 4th grader, and I got the last one in kindergarten.
Oh, wow. You got a good spread there.
Up.
Yeah.
And so I have a vision for my kid's life. And, some of it is from my own money wounds. I went to college. I went to Purdue University, studied mechanical engineering, went to Clemson and got my MBA. And I also had this other friend named Sally Mae in my life.
Yep.
And so I had gotten to break up with her, and I wanted my children to never even know who she was.
That's right.
So I had this vision, and I really started my money journey when my daughter was 4, my oldest daughter. And so I started the 529 college savings plan.
Yep.
And by the time we went to look at colleges, that $100 a month, and then we went to $200 a month when we got debt free except for our house, that had grown to right at $100,000.
Right. Wow,
and
that's
so
incredible.
She's gonna it's in stone now. She's gonna graduate out of college owing nothing.
Yeah. That is great.
So she's not even friends with Sally Mae.
Doesn't even know. What she has realized though is that all of her friends know who Sally Mae.
Yeah, exactly.
Federal direct loan are, and I think she really has comprehended this is a major gift that I've been given.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. When you look at the early years of someone's career and the ability to have more money available to save, to set those goals and those visions without having to pay those debts back. It just sets them up for success long term. And so that planning you did when she was 4 to start that process, $100, you think, well, that's not a lot of money in the scheme of things, but giving it that time and that opportunity to grow gives you the ability to go through college and not owe those debts. So you're right.
Here's what really stands out to me. And I think this is, you guys know this way better than I as investment advisors and teachers. But when I started saving for my daughter's college, she wasn't even in kindergarten. And the idea of her going to college seemed like mythology. Like that's so far away. And now all of a sudden it's reality. And now I'm looking at retirement. It's about the same distance away as my daughter was from college. Yep. It seems mythological.
Right.
But something tells me I'm going to blink and retirement's going to be there. I'm so glad I'm making good decisions now.
That's right.
So that later that money will be there.
Yeah. And speaking of making those decisions, your book lays out a great process of getting those visions on paper, thinking through them, planning for them, making sure that you not only have this great dream, but setting yourselves up to achieve that dream. What are some resources that you have out there to help them get through that process?
Sure. We do have a link. It's at iwbnin.com/2020money. And that stands for I was broke, now I'm not, iwbnin.com/2020money. And there's dreams list that they can download there. They can also download a SMART goals worksheet so they can have specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, and time bound.
Yep.
There's a dreams journal that they can write down as they go through those 22 questions. And so I really encourage people to do that, because in the habit of writing all those down, every time you rewrite it, you'll get better at it and more firm in your conviction that it really is your dream, not your parents' dream, not someone else's dream for you, but your very own dream.
And it becomes more clear the more you write down and the more you revisit it. Every single time, it's just more and more real. So, Yeah, we'll link that in the show notes so people can go directly there and get those resources.
And, I'm one that I don't like to journal. I don't do a lot of writing. As I was going through your book, it doesn't have to be fancy. It doesn't have to be anything neat. It has to be my thoughts. I'm just putting on paper to make it more concrete. And so if you think, I'm not a great writer, it's not gonna be spelled right. It's gonna have grammar errors. That's fine. It's your goal. It's what you're trying to achieve. You're putting on a paper to get your process started. And for anybody out there, you can do it.
Yeah, and I urge you, you don't have to write up 71 dreams. Write down the ones that immediately come to mind, and don't view it as a moment in time. View it as something that you're going to do the rest of your life. Add dreams as you go along.
Yep.
Take dreams off that no longer are your dreams, and let it be a living, organic part of your life.
That's right.
That's good.
So, Joe, it is time for our listeners, one of their favorite times from what I hear of the episode. It is time for the dad joke of the week. So, Joe, what have you got for us?
Well, I will tell you, I had a nightmare last night that I was a muffler on a car. I woke up exhausted.
I like it. That is good.
The exhaust. Oh, that's so true. And so we're sitting here recording this at a time when the financial markets are kind of exhausting. Woo! So that's kind of a fitting one for us there. So, Joe, you talked about, you gave us 5 guidelines for clarifying your fully funded life. Number 4 was to write it down. What about, so we've talked about writing it down a lot, but what about that makes it scary, and how can we get past the fear?
Well, I think there's several reasons why it's scary. And one is we've written down stuff before and then didn't do it, or it didn't come true. We put ourselves out there and some of the stuff just didn't happen. And I would just say, don't let some failure in the past dictate how you choose to live the rest of your life in the future. Of course, you're going to have failure. Failure, what do they say? The path to success is littered with failures.
Yeah,
Thomas Edison is known for 1,000 different patents and inventions, had over 10,000 failed experiments. And they once said, somebody made a comment on that, and he's like, I don't view any of them as failures. I have merely found 10,000 ways that do not work.
That's right.
And so I think that's the biggest reason. The second reason is, as we shared, others may see it and there's accountability created. I also think that there's another one is it's the cost side of the equation.
Right.
That pretty quickly after we write it down, we start looking at the cost.
Yeah. You mentioned the difference between kids when they're asked their goals and adults. Kids, especially when they don't have that money factor built in, the experiences of, failures and costs and the money disappearing on your normal everyday life. Kids are just, they'll set those dreams high.
My 4th grade son, man, he thinks dad's got it all, and anything he wants, dad, just go get it.
Yep.
You have money. And I tell him, and this is something that I've set up in my household. I refuse to say in our household that we can't afford that. I just refuse to say that statement. I believe it's a very limiting statement. Instead, I will say things like, we choose not to purchase that.
Right.
Or how can we afford that?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And is that cost worth it? And so I'm not intimidated by the cost anymore. I walk in and out of the Atlanta airport regularly. I park way out in the economy parking and get my 10,000 steps in by the time I get to the airport.
That's right.
That's what I call luxury car lane. And it's Maserati, Bentley. I mean, I'm talking the $100 parking area per day.
Yep,
and there's other cars I don't even recognize, but they look really expensive. And I realize if those people got money to be able to buy those, there's surely some way we can get the money to fund whatever dream I might have in my life.
Right.
That's right. And when you were talking about, the costs of your dreams. So when you connect those dreams to money, there's 2 different kinds of costs, right? So specifically some of the examples in your book you talked about were, talking about houses, talking about cars, those kind of things. So you have one-time costs, like upfront costs, and then you've got ongoing costs. So kind of talk about that a little bit. What's the difference? How should people really look at that when they're making a plan and having a goal?
Yeah, that's so good. And I wrestled with how to name those. I finally settled on one-time cost versus ongoing cost. I originally called a moment cost and lifestyle cost.
Yeah.
And really, it's a lot of times people really want to have a house. I work in the world of personal finance. A lot of people have that first-time home buyer dream.
Right.
And they just want to get the house, and they view one cost and one cost only, and that is the down payment and closing cost.
Yep.
Right.
And they forget, hey, there's maintenance costs, there's utility costs, there's insurance costs. There's so many added costs that are ongoing costs. And so what I really am encouraging people to do is to really think through all of the cost of the dream, because what do they say? I want you to get your dream. I don't want your dream to get you.
Yes.
Mhm.
And I found many people who get the dream, and then the dream blows them up.
Yeah.
Right.
And
Yeah.
I learned this early and often, and I decided to go into the world of investing. And when I was an engineer, I did some mergers and acquisitions work and I found my gift is fixing broken businesses. That's my gift.
Mm-hmm.
And so I bought a couple of broken businesses and then fixed them up. And one of the things that I learned early is if you have to have the money to buy them, but then you have to have the money to feed them and nurture them while you're fixing them.
Yep.
That's right.
And I have seen so many friends buy a business that's struggling, and then they forget that lifestyle, that ongoing cost, and it absolutely eats them alive. And they end up, the dream that they had becomes their nightmare.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
And they are exhausted. And
Yeah.
they end up losing their dream and selling it even more at a discount than they bought it in the first place.
Yeah. And we see that a lot too with like second homes, vacation homes, things like that, where, it's a great goal. It's a great dream to have. But you're right. They only look at that first cost. And then when the ongoing costs come, it hurts and burdens their lifestyle to the point where they can't enjoy that great dream and goal they had.
There you go. I've seen people with a brand new car. They've been driving, the old beater car that's been paid off, and it's had annoying maintenance issues. But then they get the new car, and that's a huge cost. And then the insurance goes through the roof.
Oh, yeah.
If you're in a state like I live in, South Carolina, you have a property tax you have to pay on that vehicle, which is through the roof.
Wow.
I'm talking 50x or higher that of a used old car.
Huh.
And then they don't understand that. And then the next thing you hear them is complaining about this new car, and the dream is the tarnish definitely is worn off the dream.
Yeah.
Yes.
So, Joe, you talked about, getting creative when you want to fund these goals. So we all have goals. We all have plans. Now we have to put it down. How do we get there? So what are some creative ways or some outside of the box ways to really think about funding some of these goals we might have?
Yeah, I encourage people to look at what they have in their hands to start with. And one of the primary places is their house.
Right.
It's important to be diversified in the stock market. You guys teach that all day long. But it's also important to be diversified outside of it. And I found that many people can turn their house into a revenue generator.
Yeah.
I have a nephew who I kept bringing him to Purdue University football games to watch us lose. My 4 years I was there, we were 3-8, 3-8, 1-10, and 3-8. After that, Drew Brees showed up.
I was going to say that was probably right around Drew Brees' time.
Yeah, he came in a couple years after I was there.
Okay.
I have Joe. There's two of our listeners are two of my friends who went to Purdue for engineering, and one of them played Purdue football. So I've spent a lot of time watching the Boilermakers.
Yeah, okay, that's awesome. Boiler up, hammer down. But my nephew, he's 10 years younger than me, but he decided to go to Purdue. He got a job working for the Department of Defense as a civilian employee, and he actually bought a 5-bedroom house. And he's single with no options, no prospects.
Mm-hmm.
Why did he do that? Because he knew that a lot of people working at that place were on 1-year government contracts.
Oh, yeah.
And so they work 4 10-hour
rent.
days, and many of them are not moving their family for that 1-year contract. So they literally would drive in Monday. They would rent one room from him for Monday night, Tuesday night, Wednesday night. They'd go back home to their family on Thursday, and he had all 4 extra bedrooms rented out. And as a result, by the time he met Laura 6 years later, he had half his house paid off and had never paid a payment.
That's awesome.
And so that's thinking outside of the box. And I know a lot of people don't like the idea of sharing their house, their space with somebody. But I wrote a book called Oxen, and it's about investing. And one of the things I like to say with the oxen analogy is, if you want to have oxen, which are carrying the load for you, doing the work for you, you're going to have to deal with the messes, the little presents they leave laying around.
That's right.
That's just a fact.
Yep.
And you don't have to deal with the market going up and down.
Yep.
You have to deal with the value of whatever it is you've put money into going up and down, hopefully over the time going up and to the right.
And that's
Exactly.
with your writing down your visions, you can adapt them. They're not set in stone in the sense that you can't change them. So you look at, like you said, a house or something and say, okay, if I can't afford this on my own, and you give that example in the book, what are ways I can afford it using a different approach And maybe it's a little bit different vision for a while than what I thought I'd be, but it gets me to a better spot in the long run.
Absolutely. And I chose to use an outrageous example in the book on purpose, because I really wanted it to be, I purposely had a young person who many people would say that's not possible, and had them think outside the box to kind of jar the reader to say, I first wanted them to get angry with me and say, this is just not possible. This is ridiculous. Because then I'm going to go take them to the persons who have done it.
Right.
And say, hey, look, maybe the reason I've included this in the book is because you've been thinking in the terms and the norms of your life and those around you. And I'm trying to open up the circle to say, there's a lot of other ways to do what you're trying to do if you're willing to think differently.
Yep. And that kind of comes to the review process, right? You talk about those goals. You have to review those goals. Why is that so important?
Yeah. And if you're married, I encourage you to review them together. And the reason it's so important is because if you don't, you will forget that they are your dreams. Because in the day-to-day of life, you get busy. I mean, I forget stuff that is important from the time I get called, or I don't get called. My wife texts me and tells me, pick up a gallon of milk on the way home from work. Yes, ma'am. And I drive right past the store, or even worse, I go to the store, wander around for 30 minutes, walk out with $80 stuff in a fishing pole and no milk.
Yep.
And if something so simple like that, you will forget in just a brief moment of time, you will surely forget your dreams. Doesn't mean they're not there, but they will go into the distance, and it'll be 2-3 years before you reviewed it again. And so I literally have a reminder set up on my reminders feature on my iPhone that every 3 months, every quarter, it pops up and says, review your dreams list with Jen.
Yeah.
Okay. And what do you do if you're married and you and your spouse have different goals? Is that okay?
Yeah, it's absolutely okay. And you absolutely do have different dreams and goals. You know, my wife loves to have a scrapbooking room and wants a cricket. I don't even know what that was. It looked like it spelled cry cut.
Yep.
But it's awesome. It's a scrapbooking thing. And it's not my dream. It's her dream. I love hunting. It's not her dream. It's my dream.
Yep.
And of course, we have shared dreams for our kids. And what we do, and this, I found this work well for us, is we kind of look at it and say, who funded the dream, the individual dream last? Okay, now it's your turn.
Mm-hmm.
So I funded the big red barn on the farm. Well, then she got the pool finally.
Yeah.
There you go.
I did not want the pool.
Yep.
But I literally spent money to dig a hole in the ground. Guess who spent the most time in the pool last year in its first year at our house?
Hey,
this guy.
That's
right.
There's a
It's
pool
awesome.
for you.
Well, you were tired from all the digging. That was, I mean, you needed a break.
You needed it.
Guys, I had the 5-time reigning national backhoe digging champion dig
There you
my
go.
pool. I didn't know that was a thing.
That
happened at my house.
I'm going to have to
That was a
Google that and
record.
watch some videos. I'm sure
That's
that's
right.
intense.
So, Joe, that review process, I think I was just thinking about this. So review process is good when you're looking at progress on goals, but I think reviewing past goals is also equally important. So if you cross off a goal and that dream has been fulfilled, those are good things to also remember and keep track of, because you can look back and say, wow, here's what I did to get here, and here's how I did it and where it's at now. And I was able to complete the goal, achieve a dream. And that has got to be so encouraging going forward to do it again, right?
Yeah, that's great. I need to include that in the second edition of that book.
You don't need to tag me. You don't need to tag me.
But one of the things that I know, that is so powerful, because I think we, a lot of times, we are driven to look at our failures or the misses, and that reminder of past successes helps give you that courage to stick with it. I think that's an excellent point also.
Yep.
Yeah, I think looking back can be just as powerful as looking forward when you've got a plan.
Yep.
Absolutely.
And along with that, you talked about having your kind of aha moment that really got this whole thing kicked off. What do you do if you and your spouse haven't had that aha moment together, but one of you is kind of on fire, ready to go, the other one is hesitant or just hasn't hit that point, the same point? Do you have a way of getting them both on that same goal and that same vision together, where maybe they're one's less enthusiastic than the other?
Yeah, I really encourage the 22 questions that I have written in the book. I encourage that to be gone through together as a couple. Me and my wife went away for 3 days to Charleston, South Carolina. It's about 3.5 hours from our house. And we spent 3 days working through those questions. And we found that we could make it through about 6 a day.
Okay.
And it wasn't nerdy. we're going to go through all 22 questions today. We got an hour and a half.
Yep.
We went through some of them sitting at the beach, some sitting at the pool, some sitting over dinner. Sometimes we're like, we're not doing any more questions for the next couple hours. I'm sick of this.
Yeah.
But that is those questions really help manifest to the surface the different latent dreams that we may have.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes there's something like asking the question that brings new light to that dream. And you actually get to have a productive conversation. So I've heard it said this way. We changed where we were at. So a change of place plus a change of pace will lead to a changed perspective.
Okay. I like that.
And so we changed our place. It changed our pace because no kids were present, which is awesome. And it changed our perspective. And it allowed us to have the most productive conversation we've had on dreaming and vision that we've had in a long time.
That's awesome. Yeah. Change it up. That is actually one of that's what a lot of education focused people say. When you want to go study, what do? Go find somewhere you haven't been, because it releases all these endorphins to allow you to absorb things and think more deeply and think more creatively. So I can see how that would be very, very beneficial for when you're thinking about your dreams as well. So Joe, besides buying your book, which is a great book, and we've read it and we encourage everyone to do that, it's awesome. What else can listeners do to get started on this process of gaining clarity on their dreams? Yeah, I encourage them right now, just when you get to a place, you're probably listening to this drive time or whatever, whenever you get to work, next time you have a quiet moment in the evening, right before you go to bed or when you wake up, take 5 minutes to scribble down some dreams. Be thinking of them now, scribble them down. And then plan a time to go, if you're married, to go sit down and have that conversation with your spouse to be able to really start to have a productive conversation. The other things I would encourage you to do is do right now financially the decisions that it doesn't matter what your dreams are, they're right decisions with your money.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
So take advantage of compound interest, have a long-term perspective, plan every dollar with a budget, avoid dumb debt that is on no value at all, pay the credit cards off. Those are things that sometimes certain dreams really won't show up in your life until you achieve these financial objectives, is what I've found.
Yeah, you're able to see past it today.
I could never imagine buying a business when I was broke. But when I got my finances in order, all of a sudden these became an option, and something that was definitely a far off dream, if not even a dream, became reality because of it.
Yep. And you mentioned some buying some business. Now there's a couple other businesses that you are a part of. One is Enjoy the Stewardship Solutions. Tell us about a couple of those that you're part of.
Yeah, so Enjoy Stewardship Solutions was founded by Dr. John Maxwell, who's the number one leadership guru on Amazon, sold over 30 million books on leadership. And this organization he created to help nonprofit organizations, churches, schools, the like, have capital campaigns to fund major capital projects.
Okay.
And so that's what it's on-site, high-touch consultative services. We've got another one that's for church leaders called ministrydeal.com.
Okay.
And it basically is Groupon for church leaders. And then we have I Was Broke, Now I'm Not, which helps individuals with their personal finances, basic financial tools. We also have Fully Funded that helps with regular giving systems within churches or nonprofits, helping them raise their donor base.
Yep.
And then we have another one that is called Give Enjoy Giving Solutions. And it is an online giving portal. It's the entire mechanism for which people can actually give digitally, electronically, or via text to their organization of choice.
That's great.
Awesome.
So it's very apparent that you have a passion for people and organizations to get from where they're at now to a better spot, to better impact their ministry or their outreach. And so that's just really great to see and hear. Now, you mentioned that I Was Broke, Now I'm Not, and then the Oxen book, which is about the investing and getting your investments to grow. What are some of the other books that you've done?
Yep. I wrote a book for young people, high schoolers and 20-somethings called What Everyone Should Know About Money Before They Enter the Real World.
Okay.
So it's written with prevention in mind. And we wrote that one for that. And then I've written some other books that are for church leaders that will be less relevant, I think, to this audience. But I would just summarize everything that I've said today to your listeners. I would say this: you are one or two key decisions away from completely changing the trajectory of your life. It's worth spending the time to think about what those one or two decisions are and go make one or two of them and watch what happens.
Yeah,
for sure.
Definitely. And it's those steps, right? The steps that get you there. You got to start by making that plan and then following through with that.
Absolutely.
So, listeners, we'd encourage you to check out Joe's books. There's an Amazon link for his latest one that we read and are discussing here, but also check out his other books. They're great. Check out his websites. We'll throw those in the show notes below. And mostly, Josh and I just really, really want to thank Joe. He has been such a valuable part of our podcast and our journey, kind of getting up and going in 2020 ourselves. And we're thankful for him. So, Joe, any final remarks or closing thoughts for our listeners?
Yeah, I would say if you have a dream, don't let anybody else tell you it's not your dream. Be a believer in your dream. When I first started to teach personal finance, obviously I was saying, well, I'm not Dave Ramsey. And I went and spoke one day and I had the I am not Dave Ramsey complex. And I mentioned something he said. I said, Dave Ramsey says, to live like no one else, you got to live like no one else. Who here has heard of Dave Ramsey? And I asked it just flippantly. There's about 100 people in that room and one person raised their hand. And it floored me.
Yeah.
And I wait a minute. Who here has not heard of Dave Ramsey? And it was 99 people in the room had not heard of him.
That's crazy.
I was like, have you been living under a rock? Where have you been?
Yep.
And it was in that moment that I realized that one person and one person's voice can't do what I've been called to do as well. So I just decided I'm going to be Joe Sangl, living out my passion with what I want to help people do. And from that day on, I've been freed up from feeling like I'm living somebody else's dream or taking it away. I encourage every one of your listeners to do the same. Go be you and what you love to do.
Appreciate that.
Awesome.
That's a great thought. Joe, thank you again for coming on. As always, if you like this podcast, make sure you like it, share it with your friends. And if you have any thoughts or topics you'd like us to talk about, make sure you email us at hello@theinvesteddads.com.
Thanks, Joe, for being here. We'll talk soon.
All right, thank you guys.
Up.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to the Invested Dads podcast. This episode has ended, but your journey towards a better financial future doesn't have to. Head over to theinvesteddads.com to access all the links and resources mentioned in today's show. If you enjoyed this episode and we had a positive impact on your life, leave us a review, click subscribe, and don't miss the next episode. Josh Robb and Austin Wilson work for Hicks & Zerker Capital Management. All opinions expressed by Josh, Austin, or any podcast guests are solely their own opinions and do not reflect the opinions of Hicks & Zerker Capital Management. This podcast is for informational purposes only and should not be relied upon for investment decisions. Clients of Hicks & Zerker Capital Management may maintain positions in the securities discussed in this podcast. There is no guarantee that the statements, opinions, or forecasts provided herein will prove to be correct. Past performance may not be indicative of future results. Indices are not available for direct investment. Any investor who attempts to mimic the performance of an index would incur fees and expenses which would reduce returns. Securities investing involves risk, including the potential for loss of principal. There is no assurance that any investment plan or strategy will be successful.